Hi everybody, my name's John Corker. I'm the CEO of the Australian Pro Bono Centre, and where's the little list? Oh, yes. The people we think are online are Ben, hello Ben, Gemma, hello Gemma, Hester, hello Penelope, hello Suresh, and hello Tanya. So the key idea of this webinar is to try and make it as interactive as possible. So therefore, we encourage you to use text wildly and with great abandon. So please just text in and say that you're there, you can hear, you can see, or if you've got any problems, let's just make sure we've got the two-way communication going first of all. I'm here, by the way, with Garth Kingsley, if you're wondering who this is, from Ashurst, and just slightly out of the picture, Chantel Cottrell. Here, you could lean forward, Chantel. No, she can't quite get there. Chantel and Sue Hunt. So from the centre, we're making sure that everything runs smoothly. So we're not getting any text at the moment, so I'm assuming that everybody's okay. I would like you to say, yes, I can hear and see. Tanya and Cairns, thank you. Anyone else got the fast fingers? And is the audio okay? I've dialed in, okay. So Suresh, you're just on phone therefore. All okay, and Gerald from Hester, thank you. And make sure you've got selected all participants as well so that other people can see your text, unless you've got something private to say. But I notice both Suresh and Tanya are coming in privately, so if you've got that little drop-down menu at the bottom, you can select all participants, and we're more likely to have a conversational webinar. Okay, so Elaine Johnson says it's a bit muffled. See anyone talking? Just a static screen. Okay. What do you think, Chantal?
That might be better than seeing us.
You should be able to see Elaine. Is anyone else seeing a static screen, or is this just something that is coming through from Elaine?
Okay, so Elaine, I'll just keep talking so that we've at least got a test track of what's going on. Can people see and hear Garth and I? Anyone else got problems? It seems to have come good for you. James, tell people to click on the participants button on the top right of the screen. Just the top right of the screen, participants button. Oh, I see. In the drop-down menu at the top, there's a participants. You should click on that. Okay, so we've now got 10 attendees. We've just been joined by James Farrell. Hello, James. And Elaine Johnson, who we know is texting there. I'm hoping now that you've worked it out. Thanks, Elaine. Great, that's good. Excellent. So keep those texts coming. Michelle's just come in.
Hello, apologies everyone. I had a conciliation that was meant to end at 1, that ended about 5 minutes ago.
Good time.
So we didn't resolve anything.
Well, we've got a present here, which is a glass of water.
Much needed. Like Singapore outside.
Yeah, it is. So, you know, with the number of people we've got here, which is only sort of 10 or so, we want to make this webinar as productive as possible for you, in a sense. We're going to show the film shortly, which is 12 minutes long, after Michelle and Garth just do a very short introduction. And then we sort of want to pick up any issues that you want to talk about. So even from now, if you want to text and say why you're here today and what you're interested in hearing about or what your particular questions are, don't hesitate. Start now. Start texting now is the message. Okay, so with that, I'll hand over to Garth Tinsley, who is the Pro Bono Coordinator for the Asia Pacific region or Australia only?
Australia only. I do work into the Asian region as well.
For ASHA, who obviously do have some programs in regional, rural and remote areas, and you will see in the film as well. So, Garth.
Thanks, John, and thanks everyone for joining. Like John said, I'm very happy for you to guide this process. Obviously, we'll show the film and talk about issues that might come out of that. But obviously, the best way to get something productive out of today is if you are asking the questions that really matter to you around pro bono partnerships, and then we can answer those for you and hopefully give you more of an insight or clarity around that. But very quickly, all I wanted to say is, and it does seem quite simple, but for me, the most effective way to build pro bono partnerships is through communication and relationships. I've seen that our most effective partnerships with CLCs is where we have been able to have a really open communication and build relationships. And I don't mean build relationships in a kind of awkward professional sense, but actually get to know the people that you're dealing with. And that's, I guess, a two-way street. Obviously, it means us coming out to you if we can, and you coming to us. And I know that often people from CLCs do get to travel every now and then for different things, and our invitation is always, if you're in Sydney or in one of the locations where ASHA has an office, to drop in there and start to form those relationships and friendships so that we can get to know each other and build on that, and then have that open communication. And quite often we've seen our partnerships develop from one small piece of work, which gets builds that trust between each other, and from there it builds into something much bigger, and before you know it, you're labelling it a partnership. And I think that's the funny thing about these things. We try and formalise these partnerships, but quite often they are generated or start in what is quite an informal context. And I think that's a great way in some ways, because it's built upon the relationships and communication between both the firm and the CLC. So encourage you to do that. We've got offices in Perth, Brisbane, Canberra, Melbourne and Sydney. So wherever you're based around the nation, there may not be one always close to you, but if you happen to be in one of those places, the offer is always there to come in and have a chat. And then otherwise, talk by phone, which is always another way to discuss things. But yeah, that was all I wanted to start off by saying, the importance of communication and relationships in forming partnerships of this kind.
Okay, thanks, Garth. Michelle will be probably known to most of you, who I think was still the first pro bono coordinator in Australia at a firm and is now pro bono partner, Gilbert Foden. And need I say more, we have great depth of experience here, great depth of experience. So, and hello to Ros Munro, who's joined the webinar as well. Hi, Ros.
Thank you for setting me up. Thanks, John. Thanks, Garth. I actually don't have a lot to add to what Garth said. I think it's 100% correct to say it's the relationship formation and the communication, therefore, that forms that. What I would add is, I think there's a tendency for some firms and CLCs to think, okay, we'll hook up with this particular organisation. Don't limit your relationships, because there's not always capacity to take on your work, even if you have a strong relationship with a particular firm. There are times when each of us gets busy in particular areas, and that may be the area you're in. So, spread yourself around a bit. We do. I'm sure ASHAs do as well. The other thing I'd encourage you to do, in addition to everything Garth said, is if you're not sure, ask us. As long as you don't mind us saying to you, no, sorry, we can't, we don't do that, or we can't at the moment, we don't mind how many times you ring and ask, because it's only when we start hearing about the repeated requests we get more knowledge about where the demand areas are for you, or where the demand areas are that you don't have the resources, skill base or whatever, that we might be able to address. So that's, and I guess, an extension of what Garth is saying regarding communication. Stay in touch. We never think there's any stupid questions. And yes, similarly to Garth, if you are around in Sydney, and we host a number of meetings, I think each of us at our offices, give one of us a call, pop in, maybe all of us can catch up for a coffee, because it is very collegiate. What we're aiming to do is provide services where we can, and if we can't do it, we'll ring our shirts, we'll ring Clayton Youth, whatever, and try and get the issue resolved.
Just for Tanya, just in relation to your text, it's Michelle Hannon, Hannon, who's a pro bono partner at Gilbert and Tobin. So everybody got that. Now, with that, I think we're going to roll the film. So please do take some notes out of that. We're interested in your feedback on it. There may be some slight delay or lag because it is being run through the webinar software itself. And if it doesn't start for you, let us know by sending us a text and we'll send you a link. But it takes 12 minutes, so it's now time 12 past, so we should resume about 12:25, 2:25, sorry.
There is such a vast array of people within the demographics of our community that just can't have to talk to people and maintain the relationship, but some of it is just about getting it. It's not all going to happen using technology. It has to be face-to-face personal contact. It's really important to make sure that you really understand the community you're working with and build long-term, deep and trusting relationships. And really face-to-face contact is the only way that you really can get that right.
The Central Coast CLC does a lot of work with Gilbert and Tobin and Ashurst around Aboriginal will stays, which is really successful in our area, given such a large population of Aboriginal people.
Because you're there for 2 days, you do start to build that relationship with the lawyers in the community legal sector. You build a relationship with the organisation that's hosting the clinic. You show that the promise of pro bono services is not a pipe dream. There are actually practical services to be provided. You start to understand a little bit about the community.
Working with some of those, bigger firms, they're usually really good at taking on, local advice. So we've had to sort of, give them some tips around, working with our community as well.
We've found that it's absolutely essential that the lawyers and partners involved in particular projects have appropriate cultural capacity training. We'll always work with collaboratively to identify what the needs are, what the appropriate program is. There's no one-size-fits-all training program to help people understand the needs of different communities.
So I'm a pro bono partner in Ashurst. Our focus areas in Australia are Indigenous clients, rural, regional and remote communities, and clients who have cognitive impairment, mental illness, or their carers. I'm also here on this bush trip this week to see firsthand the work of NAJA. We have a long-term relationship with NAJA and we send up to Condees on a rolling basis every 6 months. I'm a placement assistant team, so I've got my own caseload. I sort of take on the files from the previous Condees. Pretty much everything that's not
fantastic professional development opportunity for pro bono lawyers to get their teeth into CLCs and actually see and do what is actually happening on the ground here. So I love seeing the range of work that we do and the way in which we're doing it. They're upskilling themselves in areas of law that they would not otherwise touch.
We know that law firms don't want to transgress the space which is traditionally legal aid funded. However, we do find that there are some law firms who are actually really trying to play with that a little bit. We really like to support CLCs both with the organisational support, so helping them with corporate governance issues, might be reviewing their employment policies, might be helping to draft consent forms for them to use with their own clients. But I think what I've seen is that our lawyers actually get the most out of the pro bono access to justice work, where they're providing direct legal advice to the clients of the CLC. And I think to have a successful relationship with the CLC, you do a bit of both. But when it comes to pro bono work, we obviously can work with organisations in the areas of our regular commercial expertise. But over the years of doing a lot of pro bono work in particular spheres, we've also become expert in some areas of pro bono work as well. We've done a lot of asylum seeker work. We consider ourselves to have some poverty law expertise. I've got a particular bias in ensuring helping people who have disabilities, but I also am very fiercely strong on women's rights, and so I will act for women in a sexual harassment matter for free, without question.
For the last 20 years, R&B Lawyers has had a relationship with Illawarra Legal Centre. We've done a rotating roster within our firm, so that potential listeners attend each week. There's nobody that doesn't participate, and everyone has their designated days to attend.
A really useful example happened recently with our community development project, Cities Creating Change, was recording a single, and we thought, okay, well, we don't know very much about copyright or intellectual property, so we obtained a referral through Tickles.
One of the key non-legal assistance that pro bono providers have given us is the design of our annual report, and that has been absolutely worth its weight in gold.
You don't really embark on a relationship or a partnership or a collaboration. You embark on a piece of work together. And if that goes well, then there might be the opportunity to do the next thing, and then gradually there'll be the next thing and the next thing. And you turn around a year later and you say, oh, we have a partnership. Look, I've got no issue with a community legal centre asking for money or a secondment, but my preference is to start with something small and then grow it into something larger.
The relationship we have with AGS to provide this credit and debt legal service started off with a conversation over a meal here in Darwin.
Yeah, so we've had a relationship with Clayton Utz for about 12 years. It actually started from a meet and greet session that was held in a national conference.
Pick up the phone.
Exactly. It's not a formal process. Most law firms with pro bono practices have someone that is the central contact point, so find out who that is and call. It's just about getting it going, and start small, and then you can move into who knows where else after that. Pro bono practices work very collegiately. Our aim is to assist people who are marginalised and disadvantaged get access to justice, and I would encourage centres to have relationships with more than one pro bono practice, because we can't always meet all of your needs, and you get a broader scope to be able to face matters. But if you're going to approach a few of us at the same time, just let us know.
There are a lot of strong direct relationships between community legal centres and pro bono law firms, but community legal centres that may not have a direct relationship, they can tap into Justice Connect referral pathways to access a range of our member firms' services.
With development of pro bono services, including Kingcoach, we have access to a whole heap of really talented, really experienced counsel across the state and member law firms as well.
So the bar has a website that has Find a Barrister on it. So you can search very easily a barrister by their seniority, by their gender, but also, more importantly, their area of practice. There's a need for assistance to asylum seekers in the Hunter, and so I wrote to the Law Society and to the local Bar Association, and we have over 20 solicitors and 5 or 6 barristers who've all put their hand up to do pro bono work.
We treat any pro bono client in exactly the same way as we treat our commercial clients. So that means that they have access to a partner and they'll have access to a number of lawyers who will be supervised by that partner when providing the advice.
Because a matter's pro bono doesn't mean it's second class or second rate. If you're going to take on a pro bono matter as counsel, you have to run that matter as you would run any of your fee-paying matters.
At Bidawai Legal Centre, we've been able to keep in touch with one or two firms, and that happens on a fairly regular basis because we are able to just call them up and ask them things. But with other firms, time passes and the connection's not there, and I might lose track of who the pro bono coordinator is, or they might lose track of where we are and what we're doing.
What I try and do is make sure that there are a number of people within DLA Piper that have a relationship with a number of people within the Community Legal Centre, so that if someone leaves, that relationship can continue beyond that.
The key to good relationships is flexibility, and we're both in high demand. We're both really busy, but you know, working together in that sort of flexibility in doing some of these projects goes a long way.
And it is a relationship. It's not just access to something. It's about a continuing and ongoing relationship. And like most relationships, you have some up days and some not so up days. But the strength of the relationship has been proven in the types of support they've been provided to us.
My advice to community legal centres, if they're trying to leverage some pro bono support, is to really invest in that relationship. It really is about finding one of your champions within the law firm and being persistent and also being patient.
And keep the conversation open. If the first response is no, we can't do that, explore what other options might work for you and your client.
Talk to other community legal centres about who they have a relationship with.
I'm quite happy to just hit someone up that I don't know in a webinar and ask them for help. If that's what I think is going to be, you know, in the best interest of the centre and its clients.
Talk to the pro bono centre. They know what sort of specialties some organisations or some pro bono practices have and who works in what regions.
Look, if you're a lawyer or someone else, a CLC, particularly a RRR CLC, and you haven't prepared an application for pro bono assistance for a client's benefit, and what's wrong with you? I mean, always keep it in mind, because when you've got the sort of resources of a member firm there, that's really sensible use of your own resources as a CLC.
Okay, will we back on? We are. Okay, hello everybody. What we'd like you to do is just, I'm very interested to know what your feedback is about the film. You know, so at some stage, let us know whether you think it's a useful resource. And what we're planning on doing with it is probably, after these webinars, is making it more publicly available, probably on a YouTube channel, so you can find it easily and other staff can watch it at their convenience. But we're obviously interested in feedback about whether or not you think it's a useful resource. But then, so moving on to the first question that we sort of received, which I anticipated really, which is from Tanya in EDO North Queensland, which you can all see, in relation to environmental justice and getting pro bono in that area. I mean, I know Michelle and Garth will talk about it in a minute, but I know they don't do much, and I know that it's a really difficult area of law in a sense to place. There are some firms that are mainly because of conflicts, and that's the key reason that the areas in environmental law I think are difficult. Plus, a lot of it is litigious and litigious, and it can go for a long period of time, and so it's an open-ended sort of costs type arrangement as well. So and you know, in New South Wales, EDO in New South Wales has had terrible trouble, I think, over the years, and been really strong support for those two key reasons. There are some firms, I mean, Russell Kennedy is one that comes to mind that I was visiting last week, who are quite interested in climate change and using pro bono in that way to perhaps tackle some of the climate change issues. So there are different views around about work in this area. We maintain a national law firm directory on our website, which you can go to, and all the firms that are on it indicate the areas of law which they are willing to consider, should I say, requests for pro bono assistance in. So I encourage you to go there. If you've got a .clc.net.au email address, if it ends with that, you should be able to automatically log in. If not, just send us through and we'll authorise you, because it's a password protected facility, but it's called National Law Firm Directory, and it's on our website, and it does show by area of law. So that's probably as much as I can say about that sort of environmental law issues and the planning, you know, town planning is the other speciality that comes up in that area. Although, having said that, there's quite, and you would notice a lot of administrative law in that space as well. And a lot of firms do administrative law matters. They do a lot of administrative law in migration, for example. But I think the conflicts is where it gets into problems with environmental law. But I'll hand over to Garth and Michelle.
So I think John's right. A lot of the time, as with any area of law, conflicts are an issue. You'll probably find if you've got issues against banks, we all have problems with that as well. Having said that, we currently have a couple of matters for various environmental defenders offices around Australia, and sometimes it's again a matter of asking because we have not got a conflict in that area, or we have the expertise. One matter I ran for one EDO was actually a discrimination-based matter. Another matter, we've had a few, I think, in relation to defamation. So it's always worth asking, and if there are other ways we can assist, we placed an option. Now we've done it twice for the EDOs, the Northern Territory EDO, to help raise funds. So we can't take on the matters, we do try and look at other ways. But all of us are running commercial practices, not personally, but firms are. If we're not profitable in the commercial practice, we don't have a pro bono practice, and sometimes the commercial practice does bar us from helping on all sorts of matters that come.
We traditionally haven't done too much work in environment-based things specifically with that, but as Michelle mentioned, sometimes it comes out of other matters which have a different area of law that is being considered as part of that matter. So our general guidelines are to assist marginalised and disadvantaged individuals with limited means, as well as organisations and systems. So traditionally, where a matter is purely focused on environment, it hasn't been as easy for us to take on. But if it's a matter that draws in a number of different issues and that is impacting on community more generally or marginalised disadvantaged people, that is something that we can obviously look into. We did have a matter I know that involved planning just recently in our Melbourne office. So it's something that I think is the best in those circumstances where it's an environmental justice issue. I think the best thing is to pick up the phone and have a chat about the matter so we can understand it a bit more before it comes to us. The other thing I can think of is going to your local clearinghouse, for example, in Queensland. It would be QFilter or whatever. What's QFilter been renamed to just recently? I can't remember.
No, it's still QFilter.
Is it? I thought that, oh no, it was something else.
I'm
that
sure
was
Ben will
renamed.
tell you it.
Well, I thought it was.
No, are you thinking of Queensland TLC? It used to be Quails.
No, I'm not sure. I can't remember. I thought something got renamed, but I think Queensland recently, and I can't remember what it is. Okay, I can't remember. But if you go to there, if you're in, obviously down in New South Wales and in Victoria, Justice Connect, Law Access over in Western Australia, places like that, they can obviously assist with, in the same way that you said that firms put on your directory areas of interest. I know with clearinghouses, they will often provide information around the areas of law they're particularly interested in. So that's a way of getting your request out to a whole range of different firms and finding out which ones might have that particular interest.
Tanya, do you have any supplementary questions on that, or anyone else from the EDOs to continue that theme? Is there anything arising out of that anyone wants to raise around environmental justice, environmental law issues? If not, we'll move on to the next question, which is on the panel. Okay, thanks, Tanya. The next question you'll see there is from Elaine, which is about printing of materials, particularly in the area of litigation support. Most firms do have litigation support units, and I'm not going to say much about this. I'll throw it to these two firms. Ashurst's got the bigger litigation support facility. I mean, a number of the large firms have this, and they have dedicated litigation support units.
Yes.
And it's interesting to know that Elaine, that you find that printing facility quite useful, because often it is that non-legal assistance that CLCs find more valuable than the legal assistance.
Yeah.
And
we certainly we do provide non-legal support. I think it's referenced in the film quite well in terms of the fact that pro bono support isn't always about just legal advice, but there are other things that we can do. We host events, we do printing and help with the annual report scenario that was in there. We've done design for annual report. I think the thing about law firms is that we're not just a firm of lawyers, but we come with a range of professions around the law firm that support what we do as lawyers as well. So we have got people in HR functions, accountants, IT people, a whole range of these other things. And what firms like Ashurst and Gilbert and Tobin are doing is more and more is looking at ways that we can help with in a holistic way with our clients, and that's not just about just doing legal work, but looking at other avenues in the way that we can assist. So increasingly, we're trying to find ways that others involved in our firm are able to provide assistance through some sort of professional way or other volunteering. And we do have a comms department, and we do help out with printing. I mean, we have to be more careful about some of these things that if you say to everybody, free printing on offer, you're going to have the masses coming in. So the thing with the non-legal support is we generally have to monitor that and make sure that it's being fairly provided and it's not a burden that is too significant. But in terms of, so we can do printing of different annual reports. We've helped out with a small number of those before. We've helped out with other pamphlets and things, the brochures that have been printed out before. If it relates to a matter, we generally, our disbursement expenses are absorbed by the firm if it relates to an individual. So an individual that we assist is not going to be paying for printing expenses and things like that. If it's an organisation, the fallback position is that disbursements are paid by a third party, but having said that, printing, depending on what nature it is, the printing is not going to be an expense that is going to be passed on. So if this is printing for, is it for litigation? Yeah. So in litigation, that's going to be, that comes with the matter that if we're taking on a matter in a pro bono basis and we're helping out in litigation, expenses like in-house expenses, essentially like printing, they're going to be covered by the firm unless there was some ridiculous number and it's going to cost thousands of dollars. Then we'd have to look at, okay, what's fair or appropriate in the circumstances. We have absorbed quite expensive fees or disbursements related to litigious matters in the past. So it's one of those things that just comes with the nature of taking on a pro bono matter in that sense.
The only thing I'd add is the more notice you can give firms of your needs, the better. Sometimes our printing rooms get absolutely jammed because of the demand internally on those, and it's less likely that we can get stuff through on 48 hours notice just because of the backlog there. The other thing, Elaine, is as Garth mentioned, there can be quite a high demand in this area. It's probably better to ask people or firms that you already have a relationship with to do the printing. I think you've got a lot stronger chance of getting that than if you cold call the firm that you haven't worked with before and ask for printing assistance.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. I think that's very important. That forming a relationship, it's best to start off with something else rather than ringing up and asking about having printing done. I think we are more likely to assist with those additional things where we have a pre-existing relationship with someone.
That's a very important point. Any more on that from anyone? And we need some more questions from you, otherwise we'll talk about something that may be relevant to you or may not be. No? And one of the issues that maybe we could talk about is local firms, because I think that's something that you know, is emerging more and more. Centres are managing to find, thanks Elaine, we'll come back to that in a second, or maybe we should, we'll deal with your question, which is good. Let's stay with the conversation. So you can all see Elaine's question. Fundraising is another key issue for our organisation. Any tips on how to foster these types of relationships or things to ask for? But look, people often ask me that question as a sort of, you know, hopefully a neutral, independent person, and I usually say to them, you can't. It's very difficult to just ask a law firm straight up for money, and I mean, and you may be raising a broader issue generally about fundraising. I think in relation to pro bono legal services, it's primarily the provision of professional legal advice. That's where the idea comes from, and that's what firms are willing to provide. Nevertheless, over time, there's a number of relationships where firms do give money, and a number of firms actually have foundations that they manage amounts of money, and they make annual decisions or decisions from time to time to allocate money. And I think it's fair to say the patterns of allocation of that money tends to be to support an existing relationship, often a deep or strategic relationship over time, may well then become the recipient of funds from that organisation's foundation to expand something that's doing well, perhaps into a new area. That tends to be, you know, the only instance where there's money. Occasionally, law firms, but I think decreasingly so because of the tight sort of legal services market, you know, may well often pay for people to travel to meetings sometimes, or travel and accommodation costs. What else would you?
It's not something that we do, that Legal and Tobin, as a matter of course, and that's a conscious decision. We do provide pro bono legal services. I think back in the day when we were starting out, it was all about making sure we weren't relieving the government of their obligation for a properly funded social justice sector. And I think it's the thin edge of the wedge. I know it's been spoken about more and more of recent times about funding positions in legal centres and supporting legal centres financially. But if you start to get pro bono practices to do that, then the money that goes into pro bono practice is going to dissipate. And you might think, oh, that's a good thing because legal centres do a better job than the pro bono practices. But it doesn't mean that funding is going to be ongoing from the private sector. You have another GFC, you have more of these mergers where there's tighter control over pro bono, and that funding would be even more precarious, I think, than the currently rather precarious government funding that everybody's getting. So while, as John mentioned, from time to time we might fund a project to a small amount, and I'm talking $5,000 maximum sort of thing, because we have some money left in our budget, or fund particular travel for a particularly important piece of litigation or something like that. We don't tend to fund positions and CLCs in that broader sense.
So I agree with everything that both John and Michelle have said, in particular in relation to the question about giving money in circumstances where there, as Michelle's also mentioned, sometimes there is occasions where we have got those ongoing deep relationships where we might provide some funding for particular projects or things. I can only think of one fundraising type initiative that's been ongoing in Ashurst for some time, which is related to youth law down in Melbourne, who we have had a secondee full time for many years, and that's a strong relationship that we've got down there, and we hold a fundraising trivia night once a year to assist with them, but that's based on a long relationship we have with them, and something that is an example where, I mean, there are firms I'm sure that would be interested in doing that, so that is an option for CLC if you're probably closer to a firm geographically speaking, that is where you can get them interested in the work that you're doing, both in a legal sense, but you can say, well, is there a way of doing something else as we've done with youth law, but otherwise I think it is something that is a bit trickier. I think we can certainly help out with potentially the mechanics of the fundraising. If you've got questions about how you're fundraising, and we've certainly received many of those questions before around the risks or issues with fundraising. There was some organisation that came to us and said, are we breaching the legislation, having a kin outside in our office, and we have to put in emails around these sorts of things. So we've helped out with questions around that, and there might be that non-legal side of things where if you're wanting to get some design support on a brochure or something, and we had the capacity and we can potentially assist with that. So it's probably things that are more peripheral in general, but in terms of just being able to give out bulk money, as both Michelle and John have said, it's increasingly harder for us to do that because the focus, we are, I guess, in one sense, cash poor and time rich, in the sense that we are focusing our energy on providing pro bono support in terms of the experienced lawyers, as opposed to the money that we have in our budgets, which is quite small overall.
Which makes me think there is quite an interesting idea, which is to have those sort of trivia nights, fundraising nights, that are reasonably successful certainly in New South Wales. I mean, PAC seems to have quite a good one every year, and Justice Kent does the same thing, Human Rights Law Centre, leveraging often from relationships with volunteers at the Community Legal Centre or firms with which you have an existing relationship to help you create the event, to invite people along who may be willing to part with a bit of money on the night, have a silent art auction, whatever it might be, or a trivia night. I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of us are in that situation. We're back to the old sausage sizzle to raise money, and it's hard work, and it doesn't raise a lot of money. And it is increasingly an issue. But I think in the pro bono space, that we sort of talked about the reality of that. It's really pro bono is about the delivery of professional legal services, and there's not much money that comes with it. It's a little bit, but it tends to be only in those sort of deep and longer relationships that occurs.
Yeah, and on that trivia night sort of approach, John, I think a few of us have been a bit of a trend of late to get a law firm to host a lunch or a dinner with somebody who would be attractive to lunch or dine with. And so, you auction that off. So I think we've done that for New South Wales CLCs, we've done it Human Rights Law Centre, and that's been auctioned off, and there's been Tanya Seversex, Graham Innes, various people who come to lunch, and then people buy the opportunity to come to the lunch, which we then cater. And I think a few law firms would be very amenable to that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's good community building. I mean, we don't, you guys, particularly in Triple R areas, know that I think a lot better than we do. You know that the community is so important, and that those local connections are what keeps you going and what keeps you alive, and it's important to build on those. But that's, I think, unless anyone else has got ideas on fundraising, and thanks for your comment, Elaine. But that's helpful. I think we're back to events. Seems to be where we're at. Okay, more questions, please. Those of you who are out there. While we're waiting, I'd
think I mentioned one thing as well. I think it's important to note, I think I may have said this at the start, but it is a two-way street in terms of the partnerships. Both sides need to invest in this. I think sometimes from speaking to pro bono lawyers, they're unsure about working in triple R areas because it is a significant time investment, both in terms of time as well as cost. So I guess in some ways the pro bono lawyers are also looking for ways of making sure that where they spend their time and their money, in a sense, and travel costs, that it is worthwhile. And I think it's one of those things that what I increasingly say is it's about, and it comes out in the video as well, that you need to take time to invest in relationships. And I think from a CLC's perspective, being thoughtful about pro bono lawyers, and if they're investing time and effort and connecting with you, to make that real effort to think about projects or opportunities where pro bono support can be needed. And I think that's what hopefully this conversation generates, is more ideas around where pro bono support might be helpful. And I think I mentioned before about seasonal clerks. So for example, at the moment, we're in seasonal clerk season, and so we've got at Ashurst, I think maybe 25 or so seasonal clerks who are with us for 2 or 3 months or so, and we're looking for opportunities to involve them in projects and things around the firm, and that might include doing research or working on particular victim support matters and things like that we've got on at the moment. And so I encourage you to think about proactively around things that will link in pro bono support to you, because if you're being proactive and taking the initiative to say, this is something that I think might work, and being open to have a discussion about it, I think that will continue to be something that is very helpful for us and also for you too. So I just sort of throw that out there as something to think about. We help out on a whole range of things. It's not just the casework, but also you've heard around the non-legal support, but also things like research across whole areas. I find that CLCs are increasingly under demand of time, and it's very hard to find time to research particular areas of law to the extent that you would like, or there's something, a bigger project that you've kind of left at the back because it might be essential, but it might be boring and tedious. But those are the things that pro bono support can hopefully take off your hands. And if it's even issues around law reform and policies and development of even the policies in-house at CLCs, the mention made of employment policies in the film. There's these other things that are necessarily require legal input that can also be projects that pro bono can support in. But just sort of mention that, if that generates any questions, or it looks like we've got some other ones there anyway. So we'll just mention that if it helps anyone to thinking about the ways that we can work together.
So that's an opportunity right now. You're hearing that, Garth saying he's got a number of smart, bright people over the summer.
Yeah,
and he's looking and he's looking.
But I'm leaving mine. I'm going on holidays over the summer.
Oh, nice. And he's looking for, research questions and so forth. So if you've got anything like that needs some research, and it's a very good match for law firms. Our research questions, and law firms do that work usually to a very high standard because of the capacity that they've got in the legal research area. Okay, in the meantime, we've had 2 questions, one privately, which I think we'll start with, which came from James Farrell. So, James, you've got to switch your thing to all panellists, but I'll read the question. It says, commercial firms have great learning and development programs with specialist staff. Are there opportunities for CLCs to work with pro bono firms to improve our staff development and workforce skills? Now, I'm going to throw that one straight to Shell and Garth. I mean, there is a bit of interaction between law firms and the training.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's something both our firms do, especially when we go out to rural and remote regions. We're happy to put on CLE sort type programs, and if you can tell us that you would like to have CLE in a particular area, employment's always popular. Sometimes intellectual property issues are quite popular depending on where we're going, but also in Sydney, we are happy to do that sort of work. Sometimes we can invite people along to our internal programs, but we like our internal programs to be quite interactive and people to speak freely, and sometimes they're talking about particular clients in quite an open way. and that's not possible if there are other people there. So there are some that we have that are closed. But that it's a matter of letting us know what you're interested in and seeing if we work in those areas or not. And I think both of us also do work, do CLE work beyond what our commercial practices do. So we do asylum seeker stuff, we do victims cost, which a number of you would do, ADOs, wills, estates, planning, those sorts of things. So it's a matter, again, of opening a discussion and letting us know what your needs are and us letting you know where our skills are and see if we can match them up.
Yep, definitely agree with all of that. Certainly there are opportunities, and whether it is if we are out in the community and have a pre-existing CLE essentially that can help with skill development. In particular lawyers, I know we're developing one at the moment on employment law that comes out of our Secondi NAJA in Catherine, and there's some questions around employment law that have been generated in that context. So we're developing a seminar to provide to NAJA and other legal service providers in Catherine and Darwin more broadly to be able to assist with those queries that lawyers who are not so familiar with employment law may have. And generally we are happy to replicate those types of seminars, whether it be if we're travelling to a place or if we can do that via video conference. And Michelle has obviously mentioned about in-house L&D material that we generate. Sometimes we do record that, so there might be an opportunity for us to share that at a later stage if it's not something that we can do in real time when the seminar is being delivered. And I do find that it's very helpful for us to understand what is going on in the community in areas of interest. Recently we did we've done twice now actually, a seminar on confidentiality and privilege issues that was relevant for organisations in a particular area. I think it was in the Hunter Valley region, New South Wales, and that was something that was delivered and was found very useful by organisations attending. And so when we find that there is an area of need and interest, then we can replicate that. For CLCs, there may be some not just legal skills, but there might be some sometimes no soft skills or practice management, other development things. So it's not just about the law itself, the knowledge, but there's some other things that might be helpful for you in learning around practice management issues and things like that there may not always be transferable between a private practice and a CLC, but there are other seminars and things that we use to develop our lawyers, which they may also be something that we can assist with if we're in a CLC environment too.
I think one of the other things that we were involved in a while ago was the relationship with Hobart Community Legal Centre and DLA Piper, which was sort of ostensibly originally trying to work out whether the NBN would be useful to provide services to an outreach place in Sorrel, just near Hobart, eventually turned into support for Hobart Community Legal Centre lawyers on employment matters from DLA lawyers. And it was less formal than training in a sense, but those people got to know each other to the extent that they could sort of, phone a friend and ring up, because no one else in Tasmania could provide that sort of advice in employment law. It was Melbourne and Sydney. That relationship grew up over time and became a really good, more than a training resource, almost a sort of a backup, a phone a friend type of systems for those lawyers on employment law. So these things, the lateral thinking about the way these things go can turn into different forms of assistance. Now we've had a couple of other questions since James's, which relate to this issue. There's one from Elaine, which is really about relationships and
Suresh's question.
but Suresh's question at the end is it worth exploring the idea of CLE on a pro bono basis? Has anyone done that? What worked? Either of you want to say about that?
Yes, already.
I'm not sure how that's different, but that's providing CLE to client groups. Yes, we've done it. Yes, it works. It works best when there's a local organisation on board and engaging and getting the participants together, and then we can assist with the presentation if it's an area that the CLC wants us to assist with.
Definitely.
That's been going on for many, many years.
Yeah, and I think what you said there, Michelle, is the key thing, that is a local organisation that is driving this. So it's not as if you've got a firm like Ashurst or Gilbert & Tobin just rocking up and saying, here's something we've got in our back pocket, this is the seminar on blah. I think the key thing is having a local organisation that's driving it and understands what people want to know more about, and that's been context for that. Yeah, and the context of that being driven on that basis. It certainly has happened.
Okay, we might just move off that training issue now. Okay, thanks, Suresh. Good on you. We'd like to see the fast fingers. We're not sure. We'd like to see the text coming through. So Elaine, two questions here. Where we have firms on board to assist already, what are your suggestions on the best way to continue and build on those relationships, regular lunches or catch-ups? And then following up from that, what are your thoughts on the best way to approach new firms or identify which firms to approach for different needs? I mean, I'd just say to introduce that topic that the magic word is let's have a coffee. That seems to be code for let's just have a chat and meet and catch up and see what's happening and see where we can help you and review how things are going and you know, what's worked well and what hasn't and what we can do for you moving forward. And often that can be a meeting at the law firm office, but often it's just at a coffee shop, you know, somewhere else, just nearby or something. So if I can pass on any piece of wisdom, that phrase, can we have a coffee or catch up for a chat? And I think the other thing we always say in this area is it's like a relationship in life. So you have to maintain it. You have to do certain things to maintain it, to keep a relationship with the other person. So it does mean sort of contact from time to time and you know, doing things together that are fun. It's like your own relationships in life. It's not that different. So
definitely, yeah. Sorry, I think as Anne mentioned in the film, face-to-face contact is always best. So I think regular lunches and catch-ups are great. If it's by phone, then that's fine. But if it can be in person, that's even better. I think, as John's mentioned, it is like any relationship. When you can invest in it and maintain it, it's best. And when you're seeing someone in person, I think that really helps you get to know each other more and understand things. And I think regular catch-ups are important for the other reason of obviously making sure that you both have shared expectations and understandings about where things are at in terms of the work that you're doing, and so that you can make sure that you are going on the right journey together and ensuring that what you are doing is working well, and if there are things that you can do better or whatever. And I think, like I said at the start, you know, in terms of catching up, take opportunities wherever they arise. If you happen to be in town and Michelle and I are available, we'd love to catch up with you. Vice versa, if we happen to be in town where you are, we've made that effort, then it would be great to catch up. So I think the best thing, like I said at the beginning, is relationships and communication. I think making sure that there is open communication in the relationship so that you can talk constructively about what is working well and what is not working well. As you know, we are tough enough to be able to deal with constructive criticism or feedback around what for you as a CLC you don't think is necessarily working well and how we can improve that, because ultimately we're wanting to make sure that you as a client and the CLC as well as the clients that you are helping and we are helping are getting the needs met that they need. So that's what it's all about. So I think it should be natural. The other thing I'd say is you don't want it to force. I think a relationship should be not something that's forced between us and saying, okay, we must meet up on this time and this is the way it has to happen. I think the best relationships and partnerships are those where it just happens naturally, and then you find over time that it just becomes easier to have that dialogue and communicate with each other.
I think that's right. Actually, we don't have as many of those formal catch-ups, and that because once the relationship's at a certain stage, it is organic, and you do know what each other wants, and the communication works well enough that you can speak about where there's changes. And you don't need the regular catch-up. Sure, you know, to start out with the coffee is a great idea. I'd also suggest that you might want to talk to John and the Pro Bono Centre if you're an organisation that doesn't have strong relationships with any firm yet, because there are a number of firms that are starting up their pro bono practices who are looking for more work, and they are going to have more capacity, I think, to help firms that are looking for a more developed relationship than some of us who've been around for a while, because really you get to a point where you can only take on more work once you've finished up what you're already doing, like you would understand yourself. And so talking to the Pro Bono Centre about who those firms are that are developing their practices further or just starting out on their practices could be a really good way to kind of get it on the ground floor and maybe even suggest where they might want to focus their resources.
Yeah, no, that's very true. We as a centre, we're very much focused on increasingly mid-sized and even smaller firms that are looking to expand their pro bono practice, or where there's a new pro bono coordinator. Often we'll go and meet with those people and have a fairly good sense, or we'll be advising them almost if we can on how to develop their practice and providing them with support and resources. So I think we're quite a good source for finding out who to approach. I mean, there is a downside to new firms. It's interesting. Last week I asked Michelle for a piece of advice and they were too busy, and I just sort of did it as a matter of course. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe I should be asking one of the newer firms for the advice, which I did, and they said yes. It's with the more established pro bono practices like Gilbert and Taylor and Ashurst, in a sense, you know the standards there, and in a sense it's easier to deal with. And some of the other firms that are growing may not be quite so easy to deal with, and yet that's where the capacity is. If you can spend time, if you can find the right person and have the conversation, it may be that there's years and years of work ahead out of that, and it can really support your centre for a long period of time thereafter and be really critical part of the development. So, I mean, and the other important thing in this conversation is clearinghouses. I mean, increasingly clearinghouses do have very good knowledge of their own members, what they're looking for, who's there, what their capacity is from time to time. In fact, they probably know better than we do. We know the ones, I think, that are new, and not all of them are members of clearinghouses either. Some of them deliberately stay away from it. They don't think it's worthwhile or whatever. So both places, I think, are important to talk to in terms of finding out. There are many pathways to go. That's the truth. Now, we're at 3:05 and we're willing to keep on going to 3:15, but you don't feel compelled to stay any longer if you don't want to, because we said we'd finish at 3. But there's another question there from James Farrell, which is a slightly more difficult question, I think, which is, you know, it's true, sometimes pro bono firms do a bad job, but we're reluctant to provide frank feedback for fear it would damage the relationship. How should we approach providing this type of criticism? I must say, from my very limited experience, we don't seek that much advice, but we do from time to time. I haven't had the guts to tell the firm that it wasn't particularly good work, or I might have said, you know, months later when I'm in a comfortable position to that coordinator, you know, that piece of work you did a while ago really wasn't great. I had to do a lot of it myself afterwards. So I have done that, but, you know, over to you two.
Yeah, it happens, unfortunately, and sometimes we don't know. We're not the partners on all of the matters. We try to keep an overview of what's going on, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of matters in the pro bono practice. The best way at our firm would be to approach Anne or I. So we're both the pro bono partners, assuming that it's not Anne or I that have done the bad job, which it well could be. So if it's Anne, call me. If it's me, call Anne. But speak to somebody who's responsible for the pro bono practice, and because we know that sometimes bad work does get out there, we would rather deal with it. We're not going to have some sort of retribution against you. In fact, we'll probably be mortified and try to bend over backwards to do more for you the next time. But I get it. You know, it can be awkward, but you don't need to go to the person who's producing the work.
Yeah,
come to somebody outside the system that's kind of running the practice, and hopefully not the person involved on the matter.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, obviously, if you are comfortable talking to the people, there'll usually be a partner and other lawyers who are working with them. If you are comfortable talking with them, I think you should feel free to do that. But obviously, I think that I think it's all about the way that you do it. Of course, with all of these things. That if someone has done a bad job, I think, as Michelle has said, in our case, all of the lawyers that we work with, they would be mortified. They would, in a sense, they want to do the best for you, and so they've invested time and effort in doing that. Find out that a piece of work is not what you expected because it answers a question or it's not done in a proper way or misunderstands something that was in the instructions. I think it's best for those lawyers to know because I think that would lead them to go that extra mile and make sure it is exactly what you wanted the next time. So feel free to go to them if you think that will help, but of course you can come to us as well in the pro bono team to talk about the matter more generally and how that can be fixed and going forward. It may be that there may be a mismatch of understanding, miscommunication on what the task was, or it might be another thing that needs to be looked at. But I think, as you said, Michelle, if we think that we've done something wrong, we're definitely going to try and do it better for that job again or the next time to make you have that confidence back in us. So I think it's all about how you approach it. I think, obviously, the lawyers that are doing work on pro bono matters, they sometimes they have the perfect expertise and skill and experience in the matter, and sometimes they may not be experts in the area that they're doing the work in the sense that might be looking at a contract, but it might be looking at it in a slightly different context that they're not as familiar with. So I think the idea ideally is that you're working together with the CLC and the lawyers working together to achieve the best outcome. So I think it's about saying, look, I really appreciate the work that you have done, the effort that you've made. I just wanted to talk to you around, give you some feedback on a couple of the issues that I picked up in doing this. And I tell you this because I want to continue to give you work and I want to make sure that when you do it next time, you're able to do it in a way that is best for us so that we can use it properly. So I think if you approach it in that positive light, as opposed to saying you've done a bad job and having an attitude around it, I think that might put off some lawyers. But I think if you're doing it in a way that is obviously courteous, which I'm sure you would, James, but in a way that shows that you are giving this feedback because you want the lawyers to improve and you want to make sure that what the work is that's produced is going to be of the best quality to help your clients or the organisation that you're working with. I think that's always going to end up being benefit.
I think one of the key messages there is take it up with a coordinator rather than the lawyer who gives you advice. I think that's, the person who's managing the program, that's the proper place, and I'm sure it's all that you would take it up in a courteous manner. Now that's 10 past. I think that we might just sort of now wind up unless anyone else has got any last minute or burning questions. I'd be quite interested, thank you, Elaine, for that positive feedback. That was what I was going to ask you to do, is just to tell us, if you can, with the last minute text, whether that was useful to you, what you think of the film, any ideas about that, and just so we get, just so we get some sort of evaluation and feedback about whether that's a useful session for you. And otherwise, really thank you all for your attendance. It is weird speaking into a screen when you can't see anyone, and so every text that comes in is quite important because that's the only feedback channel we have. Otherwise, we feel like we're talking to ourselves. So, and thanks Sue and Chantel who are here with us too for organising it, making it work. So, thank you. Great. And you can be critical. No, don't feel afraid.
This is the practice.
Yeah, send it.
Tell us we've done a bad job.
Yeah,
tell John we've done a
or
bad job.
send it to private channel if you want. If you want to say something really nasty. Something witty, that'd be nice. Ooh.
Yeah. And of course, I'm sure Michelle will say this as well, but we're very happy to have further conversations of issues that were raised in today's seminar at a later time. So you can get Michelle's and my contact details from John or Sue, Chantel, and then if you want to pick up anything that we've discussed today, more than happy to discuss that another time by phone or by email.
Yeah. Michelle, you want to say just final words, I suppose?
No, sorry. I need to.
Just the opportunity to say anything in closing.
Because I agree with what Garth said. If you need to speak if you've got a question, just get in touch. It's not a problem to speak to people, and it's a good way to start a relationship and also find out I feel like I'm repeating myself.
And as Dan Cregan says in the film, just pick up the phone. Seems to be the best technology, even today.
And it's Chantal here from NACLAC, just out of screen. I might just let everyone know that there's also a few more webinars coming up over the next few weeks. So we've also got a webinar on recruiting and retaining volunteers for RRR CLCs, and then also a webinar coming up on induction for RRR CLCs. So the recruiting and retaining one is on the 8th of December, and the induction one's on the 13th of December. And you should have a link in your emails to register for those webinars. But otherwise, I will send out a reminder email to everyone at the end of this webinar, and also send around the link to the video that APBC prepared. So thank you everyone for coming, and also thank you to everyone here who has, yes, we will definitely provide the link. Definitely provide the link. So
the directory, yes,
and to the directory,
yes, no problems, we'll do that.
And yeah, so thank you to Garth and to Michelle and also to John.